Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson. I appreciate you for joining me today and being part of our program. As always, I do encourage you to go to CourtneyAnderson.com, check out all the other show episodes, access any other content and programs that are available, ask me any questions that may be on your mind, suggest some show topics. So today we have a show that is one of our series from the Help Situation Spotlight series. And of course, this is our series that is dedicated to and created around community member feedback. So people share with me questions, concerns, issues, and say, hey, I think I need some help. What do you think? I will do my best to come up with some potential solution sets. Of course, the ultimate arbiter of what is going to be the most effective solution for you is going to be you. So here we are with a very specific show that I'm excited about. I'm a little revved up. And our show topic today for this episode is help. People tell me that I am too intense. What should I do? People tell me that I am too intense. What should I do? Now, I mentioned that I'm excited and I'm revved up, and I'm, to be very fair, I'm almost universally excited and revved up when I'm working on the shows and all the different projects and aspects of this business because it's exciting and fun for me. But I do personally identify with this show topic. Believe it or not, there have been some instances in my own personal life experience, such as an anecdote, where I have, to the best of my recollection, if I'm accurate, I have had people share with me that there's a perception that maybe I could be a little intense. I've even, in fact, had people use the wording and the phrasing with me that I'm, quote, too intense. So this show does hit a little close to home. It does hit a little close to home. So when we look at this, the first thing that we always want to do in our Help Situation Spotlight series is try to determine, is this really potentially something that needs to be solved? Does it need a solution? So as I said, that I have had some feedback that I might be a little intense. And I, in all candor, have had that feedback pretty consistently. So what I mean is, I recall back in school when I was a young child, and don't ask me what grade, but I'm sure probably somewhere in the early grades when I was, probably less than 10 or so, somewhere, 5th grade or earlier in life. I do recall people, maybe peers, using language that said something along the lines of, I'm a little too intense. I do recall more recently, I believe last week, that I had a conversation with a professional colleague. It was about a work project, and I was getting some feedback. The feedback actually was positive about my deliverables so far, but I did receive some feedback that perhaps I should maybe relax a little. That maybe, and maybe that could be related to this perception of being a bit intense, passionate, and engaged. And so let's just say that for, a couple of decades, I've had people share with me that maybe a little intense. I say that for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's always helpful when we're sharing and community members bring these issues to me and are trusting enough to share their concerns, feelings. I also want to reciprocate that and share my own experiences and feelings. And this is an interesting topic. It's exciting, but it's also interesting because initially, my response initially when things like this is I think, well, it's like somebody telling you that you're too healthy, or telling you, that you're too awesome, or telling you, you're too attractive, or you're too smart, or you're too clean. Because my initial response to this type of feedback, personally, just my own personal experience as we move forward to describing some potential solutions and potential framework for analysis, initially when people use these words with me or similar words, I don't think it's a negative. When someone talks about someone being intense, and again, me, not just someone out there is intense. No, there might be someone in here who's a little intense. I actually don't think it's a negative. I don't hear intense, intensity, passion, and think, oh, that's a bad thing. I think, okay, well, yeah, that's a good thing. So one of the things that I did in the show notes is go back to that dictionary. I so often do this, right? We're going to an encyclopedia, we're going to a credible source, we're going to a dictionary, and part of the reason is because if we don't have a clear agreement on what a term even means, then it becomes very difficult for us to begin to apply potentially helpful analysis. And this happens all the time. I see people start talking about something and you haven't even defined what it is. So I went to my one of my dictionaries, and what do I see? I have a definition of intense. It says existing in an extreme degree. An extreme degree. And it gave an example, like the excitement was intense, or intense pain. It says having or showing a characteristic in extreme degree. And it gives an example, intense colors. Right, so far I'm reading this and I'm thinking, okay, well, if someone's saying I'm too, right, in an excessive amount of something, intense, and yet I'm seeing that intense means it's an extreme degree, maybe it's extreme excitement, maybe it's intense colors. Let me keep reading. I see that my full definition of intense also shows marked by or expressive of great zeal, energy, determination, or concentration. And they give an example of intense effort. So, of course, I'm looking at this part of the definition. I'm thinking this looks even better. Zeal is one of my favorite concepts. In fact, lawyers in the United States are often trained and taught, and we take an oath, a professional oath, when we're finally licensed after we pass our bar exams and all of our investigations and all of our in the U.S. the law school programs or professional doctorate programs. So once we finish all of that, then we're sworn in, and we often have language in many jurisdictions where we're going to zealously represent our clients. So with zeal, right? Like we're supposed to do this. And then again, our dictionary definition is talking about expressive, zeal, energy, right? What's wrong with having some energy? I don't want to be low energy. I want to be high energy. If and when I can. Determination. Again, I'm reading this, I'm thinking determination is great, right? That's, I made a decision, I'm going to stick with it, I'm going to follow through, I'm not going to give up. Concentration. Again, I don't understand what's wrong with being, quote, having too much concentration. I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, I'm analyzing, I'm processing. I'm not, again, seeing the problem. I'm moving on to the rest in the final part of the definition in the dictionary. It says, again, we're still looking at our full definition of intense. And it says exhibiting strong feeling or earnestness of purpose. Gives another example. It says an intense student. Now, I've been a student, a lifelong student. I've shared in other programs. Other than the first part of my life as a student was mandatory. Many parts of the world, including the United States, it's mandatory. It's free public education is available for everybody, and it's mandatory that we send our children to school, which we can see is potentially a public good there. I continued my education beyond the mandatory primary school and secondary school because, A, I love ideas and information, and that's the main thing. And then I also knew that by getting more information and sort of trying to quest my curiosity intellectually, I would also give myself potentially more professional opportunity. So I love school. So you give me the example of an intense student, and I think as a student, that's a good thing. As an educator, I've taught for many years, since the late 1990s in universities, for undergrad students and graduate students, primarily graduate students. And I teach graduate students now. And so I'm thinking, I love an intense student, right? And then the final part says, deeply felt, deeply felt. Right? And so, of course, that makes sense, right? It's intense. I feel it deeply. Not only am I concentrating and I have zeal and energy and I'm dedicated and determined, but I have feelings that run deep, right? Still waters run deep. Often we think of people with that intensity as sensitive. They're very sensitive. So hitting over the highlights of the definition that, of course, are in the show notes, existing in extreme degree, having or showing a characteristic in extreme degree, marked by or expressive of great zeal, energy, determination, or concentration, exhibiting strong feeling or earnestness of purpose, and deeply felt. I read all of that and I think if that's the definition of intense, assuming that that dictionary source is credible, what's wrong with putting too intense? What's wrong with saying that I'm extremely deeply felt? I have extreme strong feelings. I'm very earnest. I'm extremely zealous and I have high energy and determination and concentration. I don't see the bad. Right? Like I said initially when I look at this, and I thought, well, this isn't really a show for Help Situation Spotlight because what's the problem? It's like being, again, too smart and too nice, and too clean, too organized. I mean, what could be possibly negative or a problem? But if you look in the show notes, in reality, anything, even something that should be either benign or should be something that's a really positive thing, if it's done in an excessive manner, it can be destructive. So when we talk about those things, like, okay, I said, somebody's, too healthy, and most people would laugh. Oh, what do you mean too healthy? That's a great thing, right? Nah, there are people, and you and I have, I'm sure you've had some fleeting or maybe more in-depth experience reading about or knowing people who take even something like health, nutrition, and exercise too far and begin to actually hurt themselves. Somebody who's like, I have to go to the gym for, 5-6 hours a day. And it's not their profession. Now, some people obviously work where their body and is part of what they're doing for their job. They're a fitness model. They're an athlete. So it would make sense then that person is spending all their time, on these health issues because it's their lifestyle. It's also their work. So they have to have a very high level of that. But there are people who take it to an extreme where they spend all their time on health and fitness, and they actually don't dedicate any time for balance, right, doing other things. People in their lives, their family, friends, people who care about them will actually try to have interventions with the behavior. They'll try to intervene and say to them, I never see you, we don't get to spend any time together. There's some people who become so focused on their own, health and these things that should be positive, they make it into a negative where they go and they start admonishing people, right? Friends, families, coworkers. Now you're going to eat that? I can't believe that. You're not going to go run a mini marathon with me? I can't believe you would do that. I mean, it looks like you haven't been to the gym at all. And then it becomes a negative. Because the person starts to lower the quality of their own life. Because remember, we always want to have practicing the joyful art of business means that we have this really positive emotional, psychological return on our activities, which is going to require us to have some level of balance. So you can take something like health or take something like being very neat, right? That's usually a good thing. You're neat and clean. Although some people take it so far, they honestly say, oh, I can't have anybody over to where I live because I don't want them to bring in dirt. If someone comes over, I say to them, don't sit there, don't touch that, don't put your fingers on that. I see a germ somewhere. There are people who get so obsessed with this, it again hurts their quality of life. It begins to manifest negative, poor outcomes. So as I initially said, I don't see anything necessarily, horrible or a problem with somebody being intense and passionate and zealous. Of course not. Anything, though, to excess can become, something that should be a good thing can become destructive, can result in negative outcomes to the person, to the people in their lives. And honestly, it literally, we know, can become anything. Anything can become negative. So initially I would argue if someone says you're too intense and you ask me what should I do, I would ask you, tell me about some of the recent examples. So if somebody says to me, I was at work and it was really, it was a project and I really cared about it, and so I spent a lot of time, really improving it and enhancing it and making it better. And then there were some people on the team who said to me, you're too intense. It doesn't have to be this much, leave it alone. Okay. In that situation, I'm not necessarily sure that there was a a problem. What there sounds like there is a lack of harmonization between a person who has a very high level of passion, engagement, and dedication, and concentration and focus, and people who have a very low level. And if you think about it, again, like I'll just give the health example because most of us can sort of think about that. If you've got somebody who is not hurting themselves or other people with the behaviors. So let's say that they're go to the gym or they're out doing whatever other exercise that they do wherever they do it, but they're not going and admonishing other people, making other people feel bad, trying to shame other people. They're not expressing sort of an inflated sense of ego and self. Look at me, look how in shape I am, look how low my body fat is. Let's say they're not doing that, right? So it's a healthy way that they're expressing their enjoyment of exercise and fitness and nutrition. And that's part of their life, right? So they don't say anything negative to other people. They still take time for their other activities and other things in their life so that there's balance. They actually feel good about themselves. They feel good about other people. They treat themselves with respect and kindness, and they treat other people. So far, so good. But what do you do when you take that person, right? And it's a healthy expression, but it's important to them. It's important to them that they are eating foods that are healthy and nutritious. It's important to them that they're monitoring, their body fat, and they're ensuring that they're developing their muscles to the best of their ability. It's just important. It makes them happy. So they're not, again, using it as a tool to go out and be destructive to themselves with inflated ego or narcissism. They're not, again, being cruel or disrespectful or shameful to other people. They're just in their happy place in life that this is important. If you take that person who it's really important to them, right, and then you go out and you put them in a group of people who have no interest in any of this. Okay, so the one person's, I just want to make sure, I'm eating, and I really love to make sure I'm eating a variety of healthy foods, and it's really important to me, and I plan ahead. And then you put them in an environment with people who have no interest in this. And the people who have no interest in this say things like, hey, I eat because I have to, or I would die. Sometimes I try to eat, healthy, but if I have to eat, a fast food or something that's high in sugar or high in carbs or high in fat or something that's fried and doesn't bother me at all. If you have somebody who it's really important to them in a healthy way with balance, and then you put them in an environment where there's somebody who, for whatever reason at that point, it's not important at all. I mean, they eat the bare minimum because if you don't eat at all, you'll die. But they're not at all. They're not interested in the content of their food. They're not interested in the effects of what they're eating on their health. They may actually have some health issues because of zero, exercise, totally sedentary. And if you put those people together, let's just say socially, right? Let's say they try to they're single and they try to go out and date each other. It becomes really difficult because so much of a person whose focus is on being extremely healthy, so much of their life is built on this. And if you put them in an environment with someone who has a totally different perspective and is like, what's the big deal? I don't care what I eat. Why am I looking at the package? I could care less. I like it sugary. I like it fried. This is what I like. So maybe I'm overweight, or maybe I'm not overweight, but I have very poor muscle definition. I could care less. It's not interesting to me. Sometimes those relationships will work if people have other things in common and they can find that healthy way to let each other be individuals. But often what you'll see, and you see this in fitness areas, you'll see groups of people who have similar eating and fitness goals sort of hang out together and often want to socialize or date because it makes sense, because that's an important part of who they are. And when I said it's not harmonized, what I mean is if you have somebody who really, really, really cares excessively, right, they're too intense about the work, and you put them in an environment with people who are bare minimum, meaning they'll show up, they care enough. If they didn't care at all, I always say when I do corporate training education programs and keynote speeches on site at organizations or to groups, I'll say, look, it's not that people who are sort of what I call bare minimum investment employees, it's not that they don't care at all. If they did not care at all, then they wouldn't show up. They would just literally not show up and go do something else. They wouldn't even be here. So they have some interest, right? It's just that their level of interest is what can I do? What's the lowest level of acceptable behavior for me to continue to do to keep whatever it is that's important to me at this job? So whether it's the task or the assignment or the job title or the income or whatever, what's the lowest level I can do? That's why I use the term bare minimum. It's the bare minimum I can do where I don't get in trouble and I'm not fired, I'm not admonished, but I'm not going to do more than that because that's my level of investment in this. If you put them with somebody whose focus is the opposite, right, and they're saying, no, forget the bare minimum. I don't even look at that. I just think to myself, there's no ceiling. There's no maximum. And I'm just always trying to get better and bigger and reinvent and improve and enhance. Those two visions don't fit. It's like that person who is very focused on, what am I eating? What is this? Where did it come from? I want to make sure that I understand the sourcing of my food. And you have somebody else who's like, I don't even care at all. Don't even ask me. It can create friction, because they have very different orientations to the world. They're not harmonized, right? And that's what can happen with the too intense issue. I asked a couple of questions in the show notes to begin to see, are you somebody who, this is just sort of how you're wired, that you're, quote, too intense? Now, many times, and this may be, again, my own personal bias and prejudice, but many times when you go and you look to research this, you'll see that the traits of people who are, quote, too intense are typically often people who are academically invested and academically talented, right? So you'll get people who are gifted in some area. So it could be academics. It could be that they're gifted in sports. It could be that they're gifted in music. It could be that they're gifted in art. It could be that they're gifted in dealing with animals. I don't care what it is, but they have a very intense, heightened level. Some of it may be genetic. Some of it may be environmental. All of it may be genetic. All of it may be environmental. We're not totally sure. But you see this. Now, if you're someone, again, who is just sort of wired this way, and here's the thing, it gives you good outcomes. So the 3 questions I asked to begin to see, do you have a challenge with this, or is it just part of who you are? And let's see if we should just find a way to make the world more comfortable for how we would ideally like to behave. First question I asked is, what are the negative outcomes? So in the show notes, what are the negative outcomes of you being, quote, too intense? Now, if you say to me, well, yeah, I'm too intense, and, I haven't had a friend, in about 10 years because, a lot of people, they don't think like I do, or they don't care about whatever, fill in the blank topic it is. And so because of that, I don't want to be with anyone ever because they're not, they don't think like I do. They don't care about, whatever it is the person cares about, fitness, sports, animals, architecture, music, whatever it is. And if you say to me, well, I don't have any friends because of this. People tell me they don't want to hang out with me. I'm lonely. Maybe I'm in a relationship with someone. I have a spouse perhaps, but we have no communication. They avoid me. I'm lonely in my own home with other people there. I feel isolated. These are negative outcomes. If you're talking to somebody in a professional setting and it's not the thing I referred to earlier where I said I had a recent discussion with someone, and they did, bring up this maybe I'm a little intense, but it was with a positive evaluation of my work. So if it had been the opposite, if I'd been in a work evaluation and this has happened, sort of, no, let me be really clear. I'll give you a really good anecdote just popped to mind. Many, many years ago, I was working my way through my bachelor's degree university program. So I was between like 17 and 20 years old, but I had to work to support myself and get money to eat and all that kind of good stuff. So I got a job through a temporary agency, right, as a temp employee at a place that had manufacturing, and they manufactured computers. And so I was on an assembly line from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and you did four of those 12-hour shifts 1 week, and then you rotated the next week so that you did 4 and then 3 and 4 and 3, so it balanced out overall, hopefully, to 40 hours a week. So I get there for my assembly line job, and I realize, my gosh, 12 hours is a lot of time, right? And 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., fortunately, I'm actually rather nocturnal, naturally. Now I've sort of changed my habits and everything in my schedule so that I get up between 5 and 6 a.m. most of the time, but that's not my sort of natural, choice. It's because I need to get things done, and it works better with the way the world is. But naturally, I'm kind of nocturnal, so I actually didn't mind being up all night. It didn't bother me in the least. But it's a long period of time. 12 hours is a lot of time to spend just doing a repetitive one thing. I was on an assembly line. I literally would just put one little piece of a component onto this computer circuit board, and that was all I did for 12 hours. So other than, break and go to the bathroom and lunch, that's the one, you don't do anything else. So it was kind of, boring in my mind because there's not anything to think about. You just put you just do the same thing over and over again. So initially when the shift started, and I thought one way to make the time go faster, right, was I thought, well, I'll work faster because then, at least I have something to do. Because if I just sit there and put one piece and then I wait like a couple of minutes, it makes it like seem like time is just crawling. It made it in my mind worse. So I thought the best way to do it is to stay busy, right? So I was trying to move faster, but the problem was an assembly line. So the faster that I was doing my part, the people who were the next steps in the assembly line process got mad, and they looked at me, and some of the people had been there for years, right? They weren't all temps, I was, but many of them, this is their full-time, career. And so there were some ladies next to me, and, they were a little bit mad at first and said, hey, you need to slow down. But then when I kept doing it, I kept going faster. What was happening is it was piling up stuff at their stations, and it either would make them have to go faster or it would make them go a slower pace, but it would make it look like they weren't doing the rate of work that they could because there was stuff piling up coming from me because I was going so fast. And so eventually they got really mad at me, and they said to me, they were like, look, you are working too hard. You've got to stop, slow down, what's the rush? Because, see, they were looking at it differently. They were looking at it like, what's the bare minimum that we were told by the manager, which is true. We were told before we started our shift, what's the expectation of how many of these things you're going to be able to put together, right? And in their mind, it was like, as long as we hit that number, then we're fine. Why would we speed up and do more than that? They didn't see it the way I did. And they were talking and socializing and hanging out and everything, and they knew each other. So to them, it was sort of like, you sit, you hang out, you're in air conditioning, you get breaks, you get to go to lunch, you talk to your friends, and then while you're doing some of this, you're putting your stuff together. And they felt like if I'm hitting the bare minimum, I'm doing fine. My argument was we could do much more than that, and the more we do, the faster the time will go. And I also feel like, because I love business, why not be awesome, right? Like, why not do more of it? All of this was lack of harmony. If I got negative feedback from my coworkers, which I did, that's a clue it's a negative outcome because I'm destroying teamwork and morale. If I had decided to stay in that job for the rest of my career, I would have had to change my behavior because it would be too destructive, and I would have way too much confrontation and conflict with my peers and probably even my supervisors because I was asking all these kind of questions. How many pieces what's the record for the most pieces that people completed? I mean, I like to be like the best. The problem was and I'm not saying that my coworkers didn't either. I'm just saying in that one setting, they didn't see the same incentive process that I did. Had I gotten that negative job evaluation, then it means it's not a good outcome. The other question I asked is, what are the positive outcomes of being, quote, too intense? Now, many people who just naturally, or at least to their earliest memory, are this way, right? They're very zealous and enthusiastic and all the things we read in the dictionary. Many of the reasons that they're like that is because it makes them happy. They're not. That's what I said about harmony. The person who's too intense, often, usually, when it's internally motivated, right? That's why they were told to do some sort of bare minimum thing, right? Even with your health, right? Wherever you live in the world, the public health agencies and people always tell you, like ideally you should be eating this, or ideally you should make sure that you're taking care of your health this way, and make sure you get a reasonable amount of exercise. Everyone in pretty much the world has some version of, here's what ideally we should be doing. The person who's too intense isn't at all externally motivated. They're internally motivated by their own idea of what makes them happy. That's why other people say it's excessive, but that person, the reason usually that they're doing it, they're driven because it feels so good to make it better, to make it awesome, to be the best, to be the, whatever. So you see, and I saw this, I've shared in the past that many years ago, founded an entertainment company. At the time, it was called a record company, even though it was putting not physical record, it was after that, but CDs, and it was an entertainment business. So I I performed and put out my own music and hired all kinds of professionals and signed artists and did the whole thing. It did not end as a business successfully, but it taught me amazing lessons that I share in many other programs. The point is that in a lot of professional endeavors that are uniquely skilled, you'll see the norm is very intense people. So if you're dealing with professional entertainers, professional musicians, professional singers, it's the kind of the norm of that group because it's such a difficult job. But people who are very intense are often in those fields. So it's not unusual when you're sitting around with a bunch of professional musicians that they're really intense. It's the same thing I've seen working with professional athletes. I've worked with many client organizations in the last 14, 15 years who are have professional athletes. You'll see, again, that same intensity. You see it certainly in the media work that I've done with all of the live television shows that I've done. So many of the people that I work with in those settings, the hosts and so many of the other people that are in those live entertainment events are very intense. So you see this in settings. You see it with people who are, champion horse breeders. You see it with people who are champion, cat show professionals, and that they're just very intense. But it makes sense because you're dealing with a group of the best, whether it's the best, cat, it's the best horse, it's the best athlete, it's the best singer. You see it in business, Wall Street. It's very intense, right? Well, yeah, because that's one of the leading financial centers in the world. If you go work at one of the best firms in the world, that's your equivalent of being a professional athlete, of being a professional singer, being a professional horse breeder. That's when you get to these groups that represent the best of the best, and you get the culture of lots of intensity. You see it in a lot of high tech firms that are successful. They're just driven, right, by this how can we make it better and awesome? And you see it in anything that is set up to recognize, to support, to be part of, quote, the best. You'll see it in any field. So you tell me that you love cooking and you go to the most I'll use the word elite, culinary institute, and you're working in the top rated restaurants in the world. Trust me, the people are intense. The chefs are intense. The servers are intense, because it's the best. So here's the reality. First question is, what are your negative outcomes? Again, if you look at your life, don't sit here and tell me what you wish your life was. Be real with yourself. Be authentic. So if the truth is that nobody wants to hang out with you, you don't have any friends, you're lonely, you're sad, people say that you're mean, that you make them feel bad about themselves, you put them down, you have a huge ego, you have problems. You're not necessarily too intense, but usually to me that's related to insecurity. If you're someone who's too intense in a healthy way, that's because it's internally driven. That's what I just said. It's not about other people. It's not like, I want to make sure that my body fat is this percentage because I want everybody else to see me. No, it's because you feel good. You like working out. You like eating your nutrition. You like trying different programs. You like learning more about these things. It makes you feel good. You don't go and say things to other people to try to degrade them. You don't do that because it's not why you're doing it. If you're somebody who loves to be a professional athlete and that's what you do, you're a professional basketball player, then you love that. It's not to go then hang out with other people and say, you couldn't even do anything in basketball. Look at how old or short or out of shape you are. It's not at all how it is. It's not at all how it is. You do it because you love it. And you're surrounded by other people who are really intense. And they want to be the best. They want to win the championship. They want to be number one. They want to go to get the Olympic medal, whatever. At these levels, then you're in the right place. So the argument that you need to go through, and the framework to analyze what's going on is this. When you ask me what should you do about being, quote, too intense, I asked you what the negatives were. You need to be very honest with yourself. Make a list. I asked you what the positives are. If the positives are, I wake up every day and I'm excited about, my work and my tasks, and I'm, really happy when it goes well. I'm a little down sometimes, and not in a destructive way. When I don't do my best, I'm always trying to learn to get better. I feel so good about myself. I'm proud of all the great things. And then I want you to look, are there more negative or positive outcomes? So ideally you wrote these things down. Look at your list. If you have, 10 positive outcomes for every one negative outcome, then it's a clue, potentially, that, okay, you are potentially too intense, but it's working. And here's the thing: if you're in a situation where you have more positive than negative outcomes, I don't, even if it's one more positive, but it really does make you feel better. So it could be happier, it could be just content, it could be less angry. I don't care what it is. And you see this a lot, surely even with young kids kids they call at risk. I don't like that term, but whatever. They often will try to get kids to see what are your real interests. And if a kid loves skateboarding or a kid loves art or a kid loves dancing, they'll try to encourage that because they know if you get something that you're really passionate and excited about and you're too intense about, it could be a gateway to a whole different life for you, and it redirects you from feeling negative and being self-destructive and going out and maybe, engaging in really poor choices or crime or any type of thing like that. So you try to get people to a place where they have that thing, that they're really excited about. And the big picture of life, my real response would be, if you have more positive than negative outcomes, then the fact that you're too intense, I say congratulations. I'm serious, because how much of our time do we spend in the business world with I need people to be more motivated, I need people to be more engaged. And we have a lot of other programs about those specific topics. I've said before, I'll say again, I don't know if you can convert someone who's not at all interested or passionate. You can get them often to do a bare minimum because they'll have a specific, goal. I'd like to get my paycheck, or I'm interested in, I like that the office is close to my house or whatever. But they're not going to be that zealot, let's do it, come on guys, let's make it better, I'm so excited. It's not there. I mean, it's okay. And the thing is, even for those of us who are, quote, too intense about some things or one thing, we're not like that about everything. Now, some people have just a very, a personality where they do tend to be serious about many things. But they're not, somebody who's, a professional skateboarder doesn't necessarily get that excited and that intense about their taxes, right? They may have a personality where they're very serious, but there's going to be levels where I'm the most excited, where I'm in my happy place, where I have that thing that we talk about in business called flow, which is where you literally forget what time it is and what's going on because you're so fired up and excited. The key is for you to look at your life and look at your list. If you have a whole bunch of negatives, your negatives outweigh your positives, and you need to ask yourself, am I using too intense to really cover something else, where I'm really unhappy, where I'm frightened, where I have low self-esteem, where I have unmet needs? And then we need to address those things through whatever combination of professional services and social support and our own action, where we begin to work on our own thought process to change it. If you look at a situation where you have more positive than negative, again, I would say congratulations. You're that rare person. The challenge in being the rare person who is fired up and excited is you must, and I am going to close this show with this, you must go find your own tribe. You must go find a place where you're in harmony. So the person who loves basketball needs to be around other people who love basketball. If they're not an athlete, maybe they're going to be an assistant. Maybe they're going to be part of a support program, but they need to be around other people who are that excited and passionate, because then it's one level of joy and contentment to yourself become happy and excited about the thing that brings you some pleasure, but it's even heightened when you have other people who can share that with you, who can in some ways challenge you, right? You need to find your group. You really do. So if you're in a work environment where you're super excited and fired up and the managers aren't, the supervisors and leaders aren't, your peers aren't, you know what? You can't sit there and tell me how horrible the people are. It's not. That's their culture. And if from the top down everybody seems kind of fine with it, but you're the weird sort of person who sticks out, is like, can we make it better? Let's make it more awesome. And everyone's like, what? It's fine. That's not them. It's you. You need to go somewhere else. Don't quit your job today, but you need to face the reality this isn't the right place for you. This isn't your group that's going to be in harmony with you. That's okay. When you get to your group, and I tell you, I've done other programs, but when you find that those things that really kind of, turn you on, that you get really intense about this, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to do it. It's exciting and fun then to be with other people who are the same orientation, and it just sort of enriches everything in your life. It's so meaningful. So again, look at your list. You need to get to the point where you have more positives than negatives. If you have more negatives than positive, I'm again arguing you probably are mislabeling. What you're calling too intense is probably something else. Maybe untreated depression, maybe low self-esteem, maybe you haven't dealt with some trauma in your life, maybe you just, are stuck in a very negative thought process. But those things need to be addressed because that's not too intense. That's that you're negatively impacting yourself and other people, right? Shaming them, degrading them, things of that nature. Getting to the place where you have more positive outcomes than negatives, you might just be in the wrong place. Meaning that's the wrong social group to hang out with. That's the wrong group of people to try to go to the gym with. That's the wrong person to date. That's the wrong place to work. You need to go find people like you who are fired up and excited. And then I tell you, it just feeds itself. And it's nothing. That's why I said when you're in a group of musicians or your group of artists or your group of athletes or your group of executives or a group of entrepreneurs or a group of pet enthusiasts or a group, or I don't care what it is, or car enthusiasts, right? Like literally anything, skateboarders, tech enthusiasts. They need to be in a group with other people who A, understand what they're talking about, and B, then can help fuel, and they support each other, and they also make each other better in terms of their skill set and their competences. It's nothing more exciting than that. But you need to take responsibility for your own life. Don't complain. Everyone says, I'm too intense. Okay, either A, you really have an issue where people are negatively impacted by your behavior. Because if you're really too intense, it should be positive. And if it's healthy and balanced, they might say, oh, golly, he goes to the gym all the time, but yeah, he's a nice guy, and really it looks like he's in great shape. See? So you really should be getting the positives. Again, if you have the negatives, I'm going to argue you really are mislabeling something. There's some other issue that's causing the behavior, and it's not that you're, quote, too intense. When you're in a healthy way and you're too intense, other people, even if they don't share that same interest, it's kind of cool. And you're being heightened passion and engagement and being zealous, it kind of fires them up in some way. It may not make them follow the same interest, but it does make them think, like, wow, that person seems like excited about life. So it should be a really positive thing. And then at the end, again, you must take responsibility. Nobody's going to come and magically find the people that you would share your interests in, the organization that would be the better fit for you, and just plop it in your lap. You must take responsibility to go out and find these potential opportunities and then be assertive until you get to the place where you're surrounded by that harmony with other people with the similar levels of passion and intensity and engagement, because it absolutely positively will turn your whole life around. I will mention very briefly, don't try to change. Don't say, well, they say I'm too intense, I'll just be less intense. If you really are sort of wired and oriented this way, it's just, I guess it's possible, but it doesn't tend to work long term, and it makes you miserable. Everybody else may be really happy, right? You were, before they thought, wow, you're talking about health, or you were so healthy. Now look at you. You're just sitting around and eating sugar, and your health doesn't look so good anymore. It might make them feel more comfortable, but I'll tell you who it's going to hurt. You. Why do that? Why take away something that brought you some joy? You just need to tone it down when you're around other people who don't have the same interest or interest level, right? And always be respectful and kind to yourself and kind to others. Find your tribe where you can just let it all out, all your enthusiasm and passion. You'll find people, in fact, I guarantee you, who have more passion than you do and more intensity than you do, which is always awesome. But don't take away your happiness thinking I need to fit in. No, you need to go find your place where you fit in, and then everything will be great. Make sense? Thank you so much for joining me. And again, please come to CourtneyAnderson.com and let me know what's on your mind. Thanks.